First, our CNN exclusive report. We have senior justice correspondent Evan Perez. We have chief political correspondent Dana Bash, who broke the news of the latest twist in this Mueller investigation. This is a big deal, Evan. The chief of staff to the president is being interviewed by the special counsel over months.
That's right. In recent months, this has been a bit of a drama behind the scenes at the White House. And unlike, the dozens of people who have gone in for interviews, John Kelly is different simply because, not only because he's a chief of staff, obviously, but also because he came in to the administration in July of 2017. And one of the things that the special counsel wanted to ask him was a narrow set of questions. And that has to do with some reporting that was out there that the president had ordered Don McGahn, his White House counsel at the time, to order the firing of Robert Mueller, the special counsel, and the internal behind the scenes of when that story broke. The New York Times reported the story, and the president blew up at Don McGahn, and he wanted Don McGahn to go out and deny the stories. Don McGahn refused, and so John Kelly was essentially a witness to whatever was happening on behind the scenes there, Brianna. And we know that Don McGahn has already gone in multiple times to provide interviews with the special counsel. So essentially what Mueller wanted from Kelly was to corroborate the information that he already had obviously from McGahn and from other places.
Because he's talked to McGahn. We know at length he has talked to McGahn, the former White House counsel. The White House counsel's office initially fought the Mueller request here, Dana.
Right. Well, what we were told is that when things changed, when Emmett Flood came in to the Trump legal team inside the White House, he was much more strict, shall we say, about who and who would not talk to the special counsel's team, particularly when it comes to current White House staffers. And what the Mueller team had to prove was that John Kelly would be the only person who could answer the questions that they had. And so under those auspices, those guidelines, those parameters, that is when Kelly was allowed to go and talk to the Mueller team.
And who did they have to prove that to? Was that a situation where the White House understood from Mueller?
Context of what they wanted to ask.
Right.
That only, for example, what Evan was just talking about, that if Kelly was a witness to a conversation, only Kelly could answer questions about being a witness to that conversation.
So the counsel's office determining, yes, indeed, this is...
The White House counsel's office, which had objected to it, finally they had a negotiated solution whereby you say, okay, I'm going to ask, these are the limited set of questions, and John Kelly is the only person who can provide that information. It's an information that we need for this investigation. It's part of the obstruction of justice investigation, and John Kelly is the only one who can provide this information.
It's a fascinating report. I want to bring in our legal minds. We have Shan Wu and Laura Coates with us, both of them former federal prosecutors and CNN legal analysts. Laura, when you hear this reporting, what is your reaction, especially as we know that the narrow set of questions have to do with obstruction of justice?
I mean, who has not spoken to Mueller's team? That's really a central
Roger
issue.
Stone?
Well, and why? And who has not spoken to him? People who then become defendants, perhaps Michael Cohen initially, et cetera. So you have this issue coming up. And the first thing that strikes me as the most curious here is that there is corroboration for them to want to speak to this person already. Nobody asks a question as a prosecutor. Mueller's team has proven time and again they actually have corroboration. They have either hard statements or documents in some form or fashion before they'll actually ask these questions. And so in many ways they're lining up against what they already have, and their more than 30-hour conversation with Don McGahn, unbeknownst to the president at the moment in time, to try to line up who is telling the truth and who can either say that it's happened or it did not happen. So I think once again the president may be blindsided at the time that McGahn has spoken about this issue. Now, John Kelly has spoken about this issue, and it all leads to the president's firing of James Comey, the decisions about that, and it leads, of course, to Michael Flynn, who the president asked, can you see your way to letting this go? It's all very interesting at the timing of it, given that Michael Flynn this week has been so critical in the news.
And we just want to be clear about this reporting. I find this so interesting about the view that it gives us, Shan, into what the special counsel is looking at. They were specifically curious about this narrow situation where Don McGahn asked by Trump to publicly go out and say this New York Times report that details how the president had ordered McGahn to order the firing of Robert Mueller, right? Is that right?
Yes.
And this is the specific thing that the special counsel is curious about, that John Kelly has to talk about, that Don McGahn has told them about? What does that tell you, not only what they're zeroing in on, but how high this is going?
Well, they're zeroing in on the question of the intent factor for the obstruction, the corrupt intent. So hypothetically, if the president is ranting and raving that Mueller is really bad at his job, he's incompetent, he's doing a crummy job, you, Don, go tell him he's fired, that's not going to be obstruction. But if perhaps he's sitting there ranting and raving about how this has got to stop, this is out of control, I want the guy gone, now you're in kind of gray territory. I think also what really strikes me here is it shows how Mueller is really taking advantage of the disorganization and lack of discipline in the Trump administration. When Emmett Flood has to say, you got to show me that he's the only one that can tell you, honestly, all due respect to Emmett Flood, I don't think he has any clue as to who really was in the room, who is actually bearing these messages, and they're able to sort of separate these people and start to go after them because the White House has no discipline of message. Everyone's off saying their own thing, thinking their own thing.
Evan,
we have seen this repeatedly, by the way. I mean, you're pointing to exactly the problem, is that the president repeatedly has made people around him, people who work for him, witnesses in this investigation. This is something that usually what you do...
The president has made them witnesses.
Right. This because of the way, the lack of discipline in the way he approaches these things. I mean, this is not a thing that should have happened. If you wanted to have Don McGahn go out and deny a story, you do it just to Don McGahn if you want to protect yourself.
The other thing I just want to point out, which may seem blatantly obvious, but important to say out loud, is that, what the White House responded to with the written answers from the president to Mueller was all about pre-inauguration, was during the campaign, was about collusion. John Kelly didn't come on the scene until
July.
He was president, well into the first year of his presidency, and so this is about obstruction. So it's another indicator, a red flashing light, that obstruction is a pretty important part of the investigation if you feel that you need to talk to the president's chief of staff.
It's such great reporting. It so zeroes in on that arrow pointing towards obstruction. I am going to have you all stand by for me, if you will.